In 2017, Sydney hosted the International Astronautical Congress, a turning point that helped launch Australia into the global space spotlight. Since then, the nation's space sector has grown rapidly with new companies, new capabilities, and bold ambitions for launch and exploration. Today, I'm joined by Jeremy Hallett, the Executive Chair of the Space Industry Association of Australia, to talk about how far Australia has come since that landmark event and where its space industry is headed next. Jeremy, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Michelle. It's good to be with you.
Back in 2017, Australia hosted IAC, which helped crystallise national momentum for the space sector. How would you describe the legacy of IAC 2017 in the sector?
The massive legacy of IAC in 2017 was during the opening ceremony, the government at the time announced they would be forming an Australian Space Agency because we hadn't had one up to that point. And that officially started operations on 1 July 2018. And the growth and impact of our agency has really mirrored the growth of impact of our industry in that time. And it's remarkable to think Australia has had a presence in the space sector for nearly 60 years, but since IAC in 2017, more Australian spacecraft have been put into space than in the entirety of our space history before that. So as a quick measure of that sort of impact, it's been quite remarkable.
Yeah, that is remarkable. Since 2017, what have been the most significant milestones in Australia's space industry, would you say?
There's many. We've had the largest Australian-built spacecraft launched into orbit in that time at about 300 kilograms, and I know there are bigger ones to come. We've had Australia's first ever privately made rocket do an orbital launch attempt. And it did make it off the launch pad as well, which is remarkably impressive for a brand new rocket that's built. And also we've had the very first world commercial spacecraft re-entry to land at a commercial test range when a capsule from a company called Varda Space Technologies re-entered the atmosphere at 25 times the speed of sound and landed in the South Australian outback. Some amazing firsts, actually, which no other country in the world has had all of those three things now lined up. Australia is really leading the pack.
Yeah, that is incredible. SEA had just released a 2025 capability matrix showing the diversity of member expertise. How has this broader industrial capacity changed Australia's role in the global space community?
That's a great question, actually, because I've touched on kind of three very technical elements of the space sector, whether it be spacecraft or launch or re-entries. But the Australian space sector is incredibly broad and deep. And amongst our membership, we have large international aerospace primes, we have 10-person startups, we have law firms, accounting firms, academic institutions, and everything in between, which is actually an incredible cross-section of what makes up any sector. And in the Australian space sector's case, it means we're able to tell a story internationally about what the sector can do when it works together across all of those companies. And sure, we've got the technology aspects, but that needs to be translated into delivering an impact here on Earth. So we've got great startups providing analytic solutions, whether it be for climate or water monitoring, whether it's for agricultural services or mining services, or connectivity across remote distances. And that is a capability we're now projecting to the world, both through how we're able to represent our members on the world stage, but importantly here at IAC this week when the entirety of the space world is here in Sydney with us.
Yes, of course. What developments does SEA have in the near future that you believe will have the greatest impact on industries outside of space research and exploration?
Yes, so space, as I mentioned, is a very technical area to start with. But the workforce we need for the space sector of the future actually requires a lot more marketers, lawyers, accountants, business people to really make it a sector as a whole. And so a great initiative which we're ramping up really well under the auspices of our Optus Industry Fellow is a suite of workforce programs to, at one level, encourage the next generation of people who are studying now to consider a career in space. And beyond just it being an engineering or science career, you can be a lawyer and work in the space sector. You can be an accountant and work in the space sector. And then also for existing professionals, highlight to them there is an opportunity to join a sector that is growing rapidly, that is inherently international and celestial, because we're amongst the stars, and a great opportunity to learn new things and be a part of exciting technology and capability.
Yeah, some great opportunities there. Looking ahead, what do you believe must be Australia's priorities to become even more competitive in the global space sector?
Yeah, there's some nuance to that one because we have all this great industry capability here, and primarily revenues from companies are derived from export. that's where the biggest markets are, and that makes sense in terms of the global context. But what we would like to see is Australia as a nation come to terms with how reliant we are on space. So space underpins our entire economy. The connectivity of our financial networks is backboned by space infrastructure. The way we exploit our natural resources to contribute to GDP, whether it's for agriculture, mining, oil and gas, tourism, fisheries, forestry, none of that happens without space capability. And it's great that these industries succeed and we don't have to be aware of the technology behind that. But the problem is at the moment, we are just consumers of that international capability. And when we think about economic resilience, we believe there is a role to play for Australia to have some of its own sovereign capability, so we can be future-proofed against global shocks when it comes to technology or access to space or similar.
Yeah, for sure. Space is important to the country.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Michelle. Good to be with you.